The courtroom is silent, but it's a silence that brims with tension. The sort of tension that makes every creak of a chair, every shuffling of papers echo loudly in your ears. Kody Brown sits at the center of it all, a man whose calm exterior barely masks the anxiety twisting inside him. Across the room, Robyn clutches the edge of her chair, her fingers white from the pressure, and her eyes flicker nervously between the judge, the lawyers, and her co-wives. Christine is a few rows behind, her posture rigid, her face carefully neutral, but her eyes glint with sharp anticipation. Janelle, quietly composed, glances over at Meri, some silent communication passing between them in that gaze, one that reflects a mix of solidarity, fear, and frustration, found only in decades of shared history. The smell of varnished wood, the faint perfume of the audience, and the heady underlying odor of nervous sweat hang in the air, mingling into a sensory tension that could almost be touched. The judge clears his throat, bringing the scattered murmurs to silence. "We are here to talk about the long-standing family conflict," he starts, firm and yet unequivocal in tone. "We shall look into the financial disputes, property claims, and any additional issues raised by the parties concerned." Kody shifts in his seat, glancing at the stack of documents in front of him, the papers that could either protect him or dismantle his carefully maintained life. Robyn sharply inhales, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm of anxiety. She wants to speak, to make her voice heard, but she knows she must wait. Christine, however, smirks slightly, a small movement that is nonetheless deliberate and does not go unnoticed by anyone present. It is evident that she feels her leverage in this room, which her eyes flicking to the lawyers confirm she will use when the time arises. Janelle's face is harder to read, her jaw tight, her hands clasped in her lap. She is trying to keep calm, but the tension is a storm barely contained beneath her composed exterior. And Meri, quiet as always, folds her arms, her eyes darting from one person to the next, reading the room, calculating, and silently preparing for the conflict to erupt. The first attorney stands, leading off with opening statements about asset division and family money matters. Their voice is articulate and professional, the words sharp like a razor cutting through the charged air. The minutiae are intricate, legal, and to some, boring, but every line, every clause is set in a historical and emotional context for this family. Kody listens intently, occasionally rubbing his temples as if to massage the tension away. Robyn's eyes fill slightly with tears she fights to hold back. Christine sits forward, attentive and calculating, every flicker of emotion carefully controlled. Janelle shifts positions in her chair, subtly betraying her discomfort with the attention. As the discussion unfolds, small disputes start to arise. A phrase, a reference to some past disagreement, ripples a wave of unease. Robyn's voice quivers as she asks a soft question through her attorney about a financial issue that has been in contention for so long. Christine's eyes narrow, and her lips curl into a slight sneer as she angles in, trying to hear the question a little better. Kody sharply exhales, recognizing even the slightest inquiry could break open old wounds. Janelle looks over at Meri again, and an undistinguishable nod is exchanged between them. They know the storm has just begun. A witness is called, a family friend who has been one of the few privy to some internal conflicts for years. The tone is calm but precise, with small details from interactions, disagreements, and incidents largely kept in private. Every word, every memory, cuts like a knife through the thin veneer this family has sustained for so long. Robyn swallows hard, her hands clutching the table as the testimony dredges up memories she has tried to bury. Christine leans slightly in her chair, nodding subtly, surely considering the next move. Janelle's jaw clenches, and Meri's eyes narrow as she listens intently, weighing every word. As the lawyer proceeds, the evidence presented, documents, photographs, financial statements, paint a picture of discord and tension. Kody leans back in his chair, trying to work out the implications, the unspoken accusations, the subtle implications of guilt, stitched into every document. Robyn bites her lip, looking at the others, and questions in her mind how much longer this fragile peace will last. Christine, poised and deliberate, does not let even a single micro-expression betray what she thinks, though her eyes do dart occasionally, sharp and piercing. Janelle's hands quiver lightly, her mind racing through past conflicts, trying to anticipate the fallout. Meri's fingers drum lightly against the table, a quiet but unmistakable indication of growing anxiety. Tense, the courtroom is. Tense, every soul in it can feel. The judge pauses, his eyes scanning the room, acknowledging the weight of the proceedings. The air in the room weighs on one, stifling any conjecture. Then, suddenly, out of nowhere, a minutest detail finally presents itself, a reference to some old agreement that no one had imagined to arise in this particular context. Lawyers huddle together, whispering and shuffling through papers as the dynamics in the room subtly shift. Kody's brow furrows, and he knows potential consequences. Robyn exhales a quivering breath as her pulse races. Christine's lips curve into a half smile as she senses an advantage. Janelle's eyes widen imperceptibly, and Meri stiffens. As the first session of testimony draws to a close, a pause settles over the courtroom. The families glance around at each other, their faces set with silent messages. Kody sits in silence, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. Robyn whispers something to her lawyer, her expression tight. Christine relaxed on her chair, calculating and unruffled. Janelle takes a deep breath. For a moment, her eyes are distant, the memory of what has happened before flickering behind them. Meri shifts a little, and silently steel herself against what is still to come. The judge orders a brief recess to clear the air. Outside the court, none of the tension dissipates. Rather, it hangs in the hallways, quiet corners, and whispered conversations of the court staff. Kody walks in slow strides, his shoulders heavy with the knowledge of how much more grilling will come in the next session. Robyn follows, looking at him with a mix of worry and hope. Christine and Janelle say the bare minimum to each other, the tension etched across their faces. Meri hangs back a moment, lost in thought, before finally making her way out. Back inside, the lawyers get ready for the next wave of questioning. The papers that had sat quietly now are ready to be torn apart, analyzed, and argued. Every piece of paper held a possible revelation. Every line, a spark to ignite controversy. Kody sits down, adjusting his tie to hide the turmoil brewing in his brain. Robyn closes her eyes for a quick second to ready herself. Christine readjusts her posture, securing a mask of composure. Janelle exhales slowly, trying to stabilize her nerves. Meri eyes everything around her, every movement, readying herself for the storms that are yet to come. As the judge signals for the session to continue, everyone returns to their seats. The anticipation is almost unbearable. The soft hum of conversation quiets, replaced by the scratch of pens, the shuffle of papers, the soft footsteps of the lawyers. Kody's gaze sweeps across the room, taking in each wife, each lawyer, each witness, mentally preparing for the confrontations that are sure to come. Robyn's hands tighten into fists, her nails digging into her palms. Christine leans forward, her eyes sharp, ready to strike at the first opportunity. Janelle's jaw was set, determination flickering across her face. Meri's eyes dart, analyzing every angle, every potential threat. And then, the first real confrontation gets underway. A financial discrepancy which had not been explored so far surfaces, and all of a sudden, the atmosphere inside the courtroom begins to change. The wives stare at one another, glances short but full of meaning. Kody fidgets, his white-knuckled fists clenched in his lap, as he realizes this is only the beginning. Robyn's voice rises slightly, shaking but firm, calling into question the details of the discrepancy. Christine cuts in sharply, disagreeing with the claim, her voice edged with controlled fury. Janelle interjects softly but with determination, trying to make it clear. Meri says nothing. She stares, her eyes narrowing just a little, and that speaks volumes. This section ends as the judge calls for a short recess to review the new information. All eyes are on Kody as he opens the envelope containing the newly revealed documents. His hands shake slightly, weighty with the potential revelations heavy in his palms. The wives watch him intently, each processing what this means for their positions, their secrets, and their fragile sense of control. Outside, the whispers in the hallways are louder than ever. Inside, the tension is electric. The courtroom has settled into an uneasy rhythm, but the tension is far from over. The walls seem to hum with anticipation as the first witness for the day takes the stand. A long-time family friend who has observed the Brown family for years. Her hands are trembling slightly as she adjusts the microphone, her eyes sharp, carrying a weight of truths long held in silence. The camera cuts across the wives. Robyn's hands are so tightly clenched around her purse that her knuckles are white. Christine sits rigidly, a faint smirk playing at the corner of her lips. Janelle shifts uncomfortably in her seat, and Meri's gaze is piercing, scanning every detail of the witnesses' movements. Even Kody's normally calm demeanor is fraying at the edges, his eyes darting between the witness and the lawyers, the growing storm of secrets beginning to press down on him. The witness takes a deep breath and begins. "I've seen a lot over the years," she says, her voice shaking but determined. "Some things I thought I'd never say out loud." She pauses, looking toward the wives, who all hold their breath. There have been disagreements, arguments, moments that no one outside this family has ever seen. And some of them were more serious than anyone realizes. A soft murmur ripples around the courtroom, the kind that makes the air itself heavier. Robyn leans forward in her chair, her heart thumping. She could just imagine her personal life being torn apart in a courtroom full of people. Christine sits back in her chair, a glint in her eye at the thought of watching her enemies exposed, each word another weapon she can potentially use against them. Janelle looks down at her lap and breathes shallowly, steeling herself for what was to come. Meri's face was inscrutable, but the tension in her pose betrayed the storm beginning to swell beneath. Kody's jaw tenses, the fragile balance he has worked for decades teeters on the verge of being tipped. The witness begins to recount incidents that were previously unknown to the public, or even to some of the wives themselves. Arguments over money, secret decisions made without consultation, subtle betrayals that festered quietly for years. The courtroom listens with bated breath as the veil of civility slowly begins to lift. Tears well up in Robyn's eyes as she listens to details about decisions that involved her family and about which she had never been told. She didn't even know that decisions had been made. Christine's voice is even as she murmurs to her lawyer, analyzing every piece of testimony for its potential leverage. Janelle's breathing quickens. Her fingers drum nervously on the table. Meri's lips press tightly together, her eyes darting between Kody and the witness, calculating the ramifications of each revelation. And then the testimony starts to get intense. It starts detailing a sensitive incident, a financial decision that Kody made which directly affected one of his wives, safely tucked away by layers of excuse-making and silence. Robyn's head falls into her hands for a brief moment, trying to absorb the sting of betrayal. Christine is leaning forward, and a slight edge permeates her voice as she requests clarification, her mind whirring through strategies to ensure this information shall serve her case. Janelle's eyes glisten with unshed tears, and Meri shifts in her chair, every muscle taut with expectation, ready for fallout. Flashbacks subtly weave into the narrative, but only in the mind's eye of the audience. A dimly lit kitchen, hushed arguments late at night, whispered conversations behind closed doors. It is these moments that the witness describes, these moments showing how the supposedly calm exterior of this family belied undercurrents of tension and hurt. Robyn remembers sitting alone in her bedroom, heart heavy, knowing that choices were being made regarding her family without her consent. Christine recalls the moments in which she withheld information purposefully, thinking that would give her power. Janelle reflects on the decisions that left her feeling unseen, and Meri contemplates the small betrayals building over time, each one a crack in the foundation of trust. And then, with pointed questions designed to incite, the lawyers push even harder. Christine leans back in her chair watching Kody's reactions, the slight furrowing of his brow, the tension tightening his jaw. She can feel his discomfort, and allows a small, satisfied smile to creep onto her lips. Robyn's voice rises slightly, cutting through the interjections of her lawyer, as she tries to explain a financial decision she feels was not decided fairly. Janelle's hands shake as she reaches for tissues, touching them to her eyes as tears spill over, despite her efforts at composure. Meri says nothing, but is awake, nodding slightly with each revelation, as the impact of every word spoken in the courtroom settles upon her. The dramatic turn, the revelation by the witness of a previously unknown alliance between Christine and one of the lawyers, a plan cooked up between the two of them to influence Kody's decisions. Instantly, the room reacts, an audible intake from Robyn, eyes widening in shock from Janelle, fists clenching from Meri. Kody leans back, trying to wrap his mind around the partial revelation. Christine's face is serene, a mask of confidence as she watches the reactions, knowing full well the power of her secret strategy. And the lawyers wait, allowing the weight to hang in the air. For this courtroom has become a venue for personal betrayal, no less than the legal proceedings in process. The next testimony brings even more emotional turbulence. Robyn is called to testify about her personal experiences, and she rises, her voice shaking but growing steadier as she recounts her side of the story. She speaks of feeling excluded, of decisions made without her input, of moments where trust was broken quietly but painfully. Her eyes well with tears as she recounts a particularly hurtful incident, an overlooked financial obligation that left her scrambling to protect her children. Janelle listens intently, nodding with empathy, while Meri's jaw tightens, her face a mask of conflicting anger and sorrow. Christine's posture remains stiff and unbending, her expression carefully neutral, but in her eyes flickers a moment of tension, an acknowledgement of her own that testifies to the emotional impact of Robyn's words. As the session progresses, testimony unfolds in a completely unexpected direction, with the production of a confidential letter hinting at manipulation, favoritism, and decisions made behind closed doors never intended to see the light of day. Kody's hands shake slightly as he takes the document, and his eyes scan the contents quickly. Robyn leans forward, straining to read the implications, while Christine's eyes gleam, aware of the advantage this could give her. Janelle's breath catches in her throat, and Meri's lips press together, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. The lawyers dissect the letter, highlighting specific phrases, questioning motives and consequences. Every word, every line, has immense weight. Kody's voice catches as he responds, attempting to defend his actions. Robyn's emotions rise as she recalls the instances of the same nature in the past. Each a betrayal, each adding fuel to the fire. Christine breaks in strategically, questioning motives and decisions, making Kody account for his actions under scrutiny. Janelle leans in to whisper to her lawyer, looking for explanations. Meri silently sits back, memorizing every word for the next battles. The tension is at fever pitch by the end of the session. Alliances have shifted, emotions are raw, and the stage is set for even more dramatic confrontations in the days to come. Kody just sits, exhausted, knowing his decisions and behind-the-scenes strategies have been exposed for all to see. Robyn wipes at her tears, heart racing, silently preparing for the next challenge. Christine leans back, confident but calculating, already anticipating her next move. Janelle exhales slowly, her emotions on the edge of control. Meri is silently sitting, absorbing all the details, knowing the next session is going to require all her strength and clarity. The judge calls for another recess, but the emotional impact cannot be forgotten. The audience mumbles to each other, the murmurs thick with speculation, anticipation, and judgment. One by one, the wives step out, their faces a mix of relief, worry, and determination. Kody stays inside for a moment, gathering himself, knowing full well that what has come to light today will have changed the family forever. Outside the courtroom, the air feels charged with expectation. Each family member knows the next session will raise the tension dial even further. Secrets will be confronted head-on, alliances tested, and emotions pushed to their absolute limits. For this family, the battle has only just begun. The courtroom is electric. Every eye is locked on Kody, whose hands are just barely shaking as he adjusts his tie. The weight of the morning's revelation still hangs over him like a storm cloud, heavy and oppressive. Across the room, Robyn leans forward, her hands clasped tightly together, knuckles white, as if holding herself together physically as well as emotionally. Her eyes glisten with unshed tears, reflecting the courtroom lights, and for a moment, she looks utterly vulnerable. Christine sits upright, posture sharp, almost predatory, eyes flick between Kody and Robyn, an intensity that sets the room itself afire. Janelle rocks slightly in her chair, shifting weight from one foot to the other, each subtle movement betraying a nervous energy she cannot contain. Meri, ever the quiet observer, sits motionless, her lips pressed together in a thin line, her gaze never wavering from Kody, calculating every nuance of his reactions. The judge clears his throat and breaks the suffocating silence. "We will now move with the heart of this case," he says in a calm but firm tone. "Each party will be allowed to give their emotional testimony. Please proceed. Robyn gets up first. Her voice trembles at the start, then straightens out as she tells of all the times she felt invisible, unheard, and betrayed in this family she was supposed to trust. Her words are raw, laced with pain and hurt, spilling secrets that have been tucked away behind smiles and polite nods. I trusted decisions would be made with transparency, she says, her voice cracking slightly. But so many choices were made without me, and it feels like I've been sidelined in my own family. Christine leans forward, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips, but there is tension in her jaw. She cuts in briefly, her voice slicing through Robyn's testimony like a knife. If we're talking about trust, let's remember who withheld crucial information from the rest of the family, she says sharply. Her words are precise, loaded with accusation, and the courtroom reacts instantly. Gasps ripple through the audience, and the wives exchange charged glances. Janelle exhales shakily, and her voice is barely above a whisper as she speaks up. I tried to stay out of conflicts, to keep peace, but every time decisions were made without me, I felt powerless. She nervously folds her hands together in her lap, her hands shaking slightly as she does so, a testament to the storm that was brewing inside her. Meri's lips press tighter, her eyes flicking briefly to Christine and then to Robyn, weighing every reaction, every micro-expression. Kody tries to interject, trying to mediate, but his voice comes out soft, almost pleading. Please, we need to keep calm. Let's just hear each other out, he says, in an attempt to retain some semblance of control. But his attempts go largely ignored as the intensity escalates. Christine's gaze locks on him, unwavering. We're not here to keep calm. We're here to speak the truth, she says, icy but unwavering. The courtroom has become a battlefield, every word a weapon, every glance a tactical maneuver. Robyn's eyes flash with anger as she turns slightly toward Christine. The truth is that so many decisions have been made at the expense of everyone's feelings, she says, her voice rising, trembling with frustration and betrayal. The judge raises a hand, calling for order, but the emotions are too powerful to contain. The room is tense, chairs scraping the floor, murmurs rising, and the air seems to vibrate with barely contained energy. Janelle had taken a deep breath, trying to compose herself, but her tears fell down her cheeks anyway. She spoke softly, almost to herself, recounting moments of isolation and the weight of expectations that no one seemed to notice. I've given everything to this family, she whispered, and sometimes I wonder if anyone even sees me. Meri looked down, her fingers tapping anxiously against her leg, her heart pounding while she processed the depth of emotion filling the room. Suddenly, a shocking revelation cuts through the tension. One of the lawyers reveals evidence of a private conversation between Kody and Christine that had been kept secret. The room freezes as the contents are read aloud. Strategic planning, withheld information, and subtle manipulations intended to influence outcomes. Robyn gasps audibly, clutching her chest, her heart racing. Janelle's eyes widen in disbelief, and Meri leans forward slightly as if bracing for the impact. Kody swallows hard, the weight of exposure pressing down like a vice. Christine's face remains composed, but a flicker of concern passes through her eyes as the power dynamic shifts ever so slightly. The courtroom erupts into a flurry of arguments as voices start to go over each other, each wife clamoring for attention and acknowledgement to right the perceived betrayals. Robyn is the first. Her voice rises in passionate fury. We are supposed to be a family, and yet, time and again, decisions are made that leave me questioning my place here. Janelle chimes in, softer, but no less cutting. I've tried to hold everything together, and I feel like it's all crumbling around me. Meri's tone is quieter, measured, but the weight of her words is undeniable. We cannot ignore the truth anymore. We must finally face what has been hidden. Kody stands in the middle, his hands raised slightly, in a manner that suggests he is trying to appease the chaos that ensues. But the tension is overwhelming. Sweat beads at his temple, and his usual composed demeanor falters under relentless emotional pressure. The judge intervenes, banging the gavel to restore order. But even his authority seems barely enough to contain the flood of raw emotion spilling from the Brown family. Christine seizes this as an opportunity to assert her power by pointing out discrepancies in the testimony of the previous witness. If we are talking about transparency, she says tartly, then we have to address those truths conveniently ignored. The words land like a sledgehammer, and Robyn's hands shake as she wraps her mind around the accusation. Janelle's lips part in some kind of stunned shock, as her mind races through every memory, every slight, every unspoken word that seems to confirm the chaos she has so long suspected. Meri's eyes dart to Kody in a silent inquiry of how he could have let it get this bad. The next few minutes are a blur. The lawyers interrogate each wife with finite detail, dissecting their statements and pressing their motivations and exposing contradictions. Each response speaks volumes in anger, sadness, frustration, and vulnerability. Robyn's voice shakes, but strengthens as she defends herself for what feels like the umpteenth time and refuses to be marginalized any longer. Christine's voice was glacial, razor-sharp, and measured, pushing Kody to respond under pressure. Janelle's eyes well up with tears as she recounts moments of personal sacrifice, her voice breaking at times despite the best efforts of trying to keep composed. Meri was composed externally, but internally, every fiber of her being engaged in this struggle for truth and recognition. The emotional intensity builds as one bombshell family secret is revealed. A long financial manipulation kept from all wives but Christine. The courtroom collectively gasps. Robyn puts her hand to her mouth, not quite comprehending such betrayal. Janelle leans back in shock, staring into Christine, whose calm mask falters slightly. Meri narrows her eyes, going through the implications. For the first time in months, Kody actually looks defeated, the enormity of his actions laid bare for all to see. The final moments of this session are chaotic emotion, revelation, and tension. Robyn rises, voice trembling with righteous fury, demanding accountability. Janelle rises next, words soft but equally piercing, demanding honesty and recognition for her sacrifices. Meri speaks finally, her tone steady but forceful. We must face this together, or it will tear us apart completely. Christine sits quietly, calculating the next move, well aware that even her carefully laid plans cannot take the raw emotions now on display. Kody leans heavily on the edge of a table, his mind racing and heart heavy, knowing every decision has brought them to this point. As the judge calls for a recess, wives slowly file out, lost in their thoughts. Raw emotions exposed. The air is thick with tension, whispers of disbelieving speculation following them out into the hallways. Kody lingers, his shoulders slumped, eyes downward, trying to reconcile the chaos that has erupted. Robyn wipes at her tears, glancing back once at Christine, who meets her gaze with a quiet, unsettling calm. Janelle exhales slowly, trying to release the pent-up emotion, while Meri's eyes linger on the courtroom, silently calculating what comes next. This session ends with the sense that the real battle is only beginning. Alliances have shifted, emotions have been laid bare, and the Brown family is now a powder keg of tension and heartbreak. Every viewer is left on the edge of their seat, wondering what secrets will surface next, who will break first, and if the family will make it through the storm that has just begun. The courtroom seems to be on the brink of crumbling, with tension almost palpable in the air. Every movement takes on gargantuan proportions. The rustling of papers, the click of a pen, the barely breathed intake of air from someone on the gallery benches. Kody Brown sits center, his shoulders hunched as his eyes dart from wives to lawyers. Every glance a further reminder of just how precarious his position has become. Robyn's fingers dig into the edge of the table, knuckles white as she does all she can to steady herself. Her heart is pounding so wildly that she feels it might betray her with its anxiety. Christine leans back slightly, her eyes calculating, sharp and unyielding. Janelle rocks subtly in her chair, every muscle taut, and Meri sits poised still, her gaze unwavering, like a predator assessing the battlefield. The judge calls the courtroom to attention. "We shall now proceed to cross-examinations," he says, his voice carrying a weight which silences even murmurs from the audience. "I expect decorum and full cooperation." The lawyers get right to it. Christine's attorney immediately launches into a line of questioning, directed squarely at Kody, pushing him on financial decisions that have long been a source of silent resentment. Kody swallows hard, and sweat visibly glistens at his temple. Each question lands like a hammer, forcing him to confront his own actions in front of the entire family. Robyn leans forward, her eyes narrowing as she listens to each answer, analyzing for honesty, searching for cracks. Janelle exhales shakily, the tension coiling tighter in her chest. Meri's eyes flicker slightly, calculating the way these admissions will impact the larger picture. Then comes the first explosive moment. Christine breaks in, her tone sharp and cold. "Kody, can you explain why Robyn's concerns were constantly dismissed, while other decisions that affected the family were prioritized according to your own preferences?" The courtroom has gone silent. The words hang in the air, like a guillotine over Kody's head. His voice breaks as he answers, stumbling to justify those decisions. Robyn's chest rises and falls as she leans forward, her eyes shining with tears. It is electric, almost suffocating. Janelle's attorney rises and introduces as evidence a set of letters never previously shared, detailing secret agreements and private deals made outside consultation. The letters reveal partiality, omissions, and subtle manipulations, painting an image of a family operating by unspoken rules. Some benefited while others were hurt. Meri leans forward slightly, her eyes absorbing the information as her fingers rhythmically tap, almost to the beat of drama unfolding before them. Robyn's eyes widen at the implications of the words. Christine's jaw tightens fractionally, a micro-expression of alarm nobody else notices. Scene: emotional warfare. The courtroom now becomes a stage of emotional warfare. Voices raised, arguments over arguments. Defenses intermingled, a chaotic symphony of raw emotion. Kody tries to speak, attempting to regain control, but the loudness and intensity of the women's accusations drown out his pleas. Robyn stands up, her voice shaking with anger. "I trusted this family, and yet decisions were made that completely disregarded my role and my children." Janelle follows, softer but just as cutting, recounting moments of personal sacrifice and exclusion. Meri's voice, calm but firm, cuts through the chaos. The truth cannot be ignored any longer. We are facing the consequences of years of secrecy. Lawyers press harder, dissecting each statement and making Kody and the wives look at uncomfortable truths. Christine leans forward, her eyes gleaming, pushing Kody to show inconsistencies in his prior statements. Robyn can't help it. All of the pent-up frustration erupts into speech, with anger and heartbreak in her tone. Janelle wipes away tears streaming down her face and tries to keep her composure while speaking of her long-held feelings of neglect. Meri's hands fold tightly in her lap. Each gesture is so precise, betraying the storm within. Then comes the twist evidence of a secret conversation between Christine and Kody surfaces. One that had been well hidden. Its contents insinuate a manipulation of family decisions for the benefit of certain parties, against the trust of the whole family. Robyn lets out a gasp. Her hand flies to her chest. Janelle freezes, staring at this in utter shock. Meri's eyes narrow, lips pursed in a straight line as the feeling of betrayal sets in. Kody leans forward, his voice barely audible, trying to explain, trying to justify, trying to retrieve the reins of control. Christine, ever calm, allows a flicker of triumph to cross her face. The cross-examinations get hotter still. Past incidents long forgotten, disagreements, and incidents of emotional abandonment that have been brewing just below the surface are brought up by lawyers. Robyn relates a history of feelings of exclusion and emotional abandonment, her voice raw, quivering, yet resolute. Janelle adds her version, soft-spoken but piercing, each word like a dagger of veracity that cuts through the deafening silence. Meri appears composure itself on the outside, but the intensity of her gaze shows the storm raging underneath. Kristen's lips purse in a thin line, the mind racing, evaluating the dynamics that have suddenly changed. The courtroom is by now barely recognizable as the domain of legal order, for it has transformed into a battleground of emotion, a theater of betrayal, in which every word out of any mouth hangs with profound weight. Kody's efforts at mediation buckle under an increasingly hostile scrutiny and emotional barrage coming from the wives. His voice cracks as he answers one accusation after the other. Every answer fails to please the spiraling tension. Robyn's hands are shaking as she points out inconsistencies, Janelle's eyes brimming with tears, and Meri's measured observations cut through the noise. Then, suddenly, the most bombshell moment arrives. A letter, until this moment unknown to all but Christine, read aloud by the judge, containing details of decisions made favoring Christine's interests against Robyn, Janelle, and Meri. The room freezes. Robyn actually gasps audibly, her hands shaking as she clutches the table. Janelle's mouth sags open, her face incredulous. Meri leans forward, narrowing her eyes, the jaw tightly clenched as she processes the betrayal. Kody's color has paled, guilt and panic washing over him. Christine, for the first time, shows a flicker of vulnerability, which is quickly masked by her usual composed demeanor. Immediately, the courtroom is filled with raised voices. The lawyers speak over one another, calling for clarity, justice, and accountability. Robyn rises to her feet, her voice escalating with both anger and desperation. This isn't about money or choices. This is about trust, respect, and our family. Next, Janelle speaks, her tone softer, yet no less piercing, describing in detail the many years of silent sacrifice she's endured. Meri's voice rings out steady, weighted. The time has come to stop burying the truth. It's now time to deal with it head-on together. The next hour becomes a blur. The attorneys dissect every word, every action, and micro-expression. Witnesses are called again to add new information. Kody reacts with a mix of regret and defense, his emotional strength put to the test like never before. Robyn's anger dissolves into raw vulnerability. Her tears flow as she begs to be understood. Janelle describes the lasting effect of hidden choices, her voice cracking under the emotional load. Meri remains composed but alert, every word stored away and calculated. Christine stares on, her eyes calculating with full awareness that the tide could shift at any moment against her. Finally, the session reaches its climax. The last piece of evidence is brought forth, a series of private text messages between Kody and Christine, showing strategic decisions that undermined the other wives. Immediately, the courtroom responds to this. Robyn's hands shoot up to her face, her disbelieving heartbreak commingling. Janelle's eyes widen as her lips part slightly. Meri leans forward, heart racing, taking in the devastating implications. Kody looks down, swallowing hard, as though for the first time, the weight of the truth has finally pressed him into silence. Christine sits still, her mask of control firmly in place, but a flicker of tension reveals her inner awareness of the storm she has helped create. The judge calls for a brief recess, during which time the wives slowly file out, their faces etched with exhaustion, relief, and apprehension. The courtroom, for a moment, falls silent, heavy as the chaos settles into every corner. Kody remains behind for a few moments, staring at the table and considering every decision that brought them to this point. Outside, whispers ripple through the hallways. Spectators murmur in disbelief and fascination. The session ends with the feeling of finality, while the emotional storm is still far from over. Secrets have been exposed, alliances have shifted, and the Brow family is left in a precarious balance of trust, betrayal, and uncertainty. Every viewer is left on edge, knowing that the fallout from today's revelations will continue to ripple through the remaining sessions, leaving no one untouched. The air is thick with anticipation in the courtroom. All eyes are on the judge as he shuffles through the remaining documents to make his judgment. Kody sits at the edge of his seat, hands clasped tightly together, fingers intertwined so hard that his knuckles are white. His face masks a tense composure, but a slight quiver in his jaw shows a storm brewing beneath. Robyn's hands lay upon the table in front of her, palms down, while her fingers wrap tightly around the edge, the force of her nails leaving small impressions within the wood. Her heart is pounding due to the fear, hope, and anger that fill her. Christine sits up straight and calculated, her eyes sharp and focused, but the slight lowering of her lips shows the tension in her body. Janelle subtly rocks back and forth, her legs crossing and uncrossing her nervousness, while Meri remains still, eyes fixed, silently readying herself for what the ruling may bring. The judge clears his throat, breaking the oppressive silence in the room. After reviewing evidence, testimony, and statements that have been presented in this case, I have reached a decision, he begins, his tone measured, deliberate, and commanding attention. The room collectively holds its breath. Kody exhales slowly, trying to steady the rapid pounding of his heart. Robyn's chest rises and falls in shallow, quick breaths as her mind races through the possibilities. Janelle's eyes glisten slightly, the uncertainty nearly unbearable. Meri's fingers are folded tightly in her lap, with the slightest tension evident in her knuckles. Christine's lips press together as she keeps up her composed exterior, though her eyes betray the tiniest flicker of apprehension. The judge continues, outlining the rulings on the financial disputes first. Certain decisions have been overturned, favoring the wives who had felt marginalized, while some of Kody's actions were condemned for lacking transparency and fairness. Robyn exhales sharply, a mixture of her relief and still residual tension. Janelle's lips part slightly in disbelief as a mixture of relief and vindication flashes upon her face. Meri nods subtly, quiet acknowledgement washing through her as she internalizes the implications. Christine shifts slightly, keeping her poise, but her eyes betray calculation, obviously working out how these rulings will affect her standing in the family. Kody's shoulders slump imperceptibly as the weight of responsibility weighs down, and he realizes that the courtroom has imposed accountability on him in ways he did not quite anticipate. Then the judge addresses the emotional and personal disputes, the conflicts that have simmered beneath the surface for years. He acknowledges the feelings of betrayal, exclusion, and mistrust that the wives have endured. It is clear that this family has suffered from a lack of communication, transparency, and mutual respect, the judge says. While I cannot repair the past, I urge the parties involved to take these lessons seriously moving forward. Robyn's eyes water as she listens, her chest tight with memories of the sleepless nights spent lying awake and worried about her kids. The silent tension she endured, and the quiet resentment that built up over time. Janelle exhales slowly, a feeling of relief washing over her that the court has finally acknowledged her feelings and struggles. Meri sits quietly, digesting the ruling. Already, her mind is racing with the implications and how to work her way around the fragile dynamics still remaining. Christine's face doesn't change expression, but even she can't mask a flicker of tension that dances briefly in her eyes. Kody's lips press tightly together, and for a moment he just breathes, absorbing the weight of these decisions and what they've entailed. Outside the legal decisions, the emotional fallout is just as immense. The wives exchange tentative glances, some filled with understanding, others still clouded by frustration and doubt. Robyn approaches Kody quietly, her voice soft yet firm. We need to do better. For the kids, for us, for this family. And Kody, after some time, nods, his eyes locking with hers in acceptance of the weight of her words. Christine remains mum, calculating her next move, while Janelle and Meri exchange a quick glance, wordless perhaps, but one of acknowledgement, recognizing full well their uncertain path ahead and the need for caution. Gradually, the courtroom starts to clear, yet the tension hangs in the air. In the hallway, a murmur spreads like a wave across the small crowd of spectators. Did you hear that part about the letters? One voice says. Another chimes in. I know, right? I couldn't believe Kody had to answer like that. Each remark highlights the public scrutiny this family is under, placing extra pressure on a situation that is already precarious. Back inside, the wives gather their belongings, and the emotional weight of the day begins to sink in fully. Robyn walks with a slightly lighter step, though the vulnerability in her posture remains. Janelle pauses to wipe away a tear, quietly processing the emotional roller coaster she has endured. Meri's calm demeanor belies the storm of thoughts inside her head, already considering strategies to protect herself and maintain clarity in the aftermath. Christine adjusts her jacket, her composed exterior masking the mental calculations racing behind her eyes. Kody trails behind, shoulders heavy, acutely aware that the court's decisions have changed not only the legal landscape, but the emotional one as well. Later that evening, the family reconvenes at home, the weight of the day pressing down in the silence between them. Dinner is subdued, the air thick with unspoken words. Robyn glances at Kody across the table, her eyes reflecting both hope and wariness. Janelle sits quietly, arms crossed, a protective shield against the emotional strain. Meri's eyes scan the room carefully, processing each interaction, silently strategizing her next moves. Christine's posture is rigid, a mind focused on maintaining control, yet she cannot fully mask the anxiety simmering just below the surface. Kody pushes his food around his plate, lost in thought, the enormity of his responsibilities pressing heavily on him. The conversation is tentative, careful, each word measured. Robyn finally breaks the silence, her voice soft but steady. "We've been through a lot today. I hope we can start moving forward, really listening to each other." Janelle nods slightly, adding, "It's going to take time, but maybe this is a turning point." Meri remains quiet, her gaze distant, but her presence signals a cautious optimism. Christine finally speaks, her voice calm, yet tinged with vulnerability. "We can't undo the past, but we can choose how we handle the future." Later that evening, the family reconvenes at home. The weight of the day pressing down in the silence between them. Dinner is subdued, the air thick with unspoken words. Robyn looks across the table at Kody, a mixture of hope and wariness in her eyes. Janelle sits quietly, arms crossed, a protective shield against the emotional strain. Meri scans the room, her eyes watchful, processing each interaction, silently strategizing her next moves. Christine sits rigidly, lost in thought as she focuses on the ways to maintain her grip on control. Yet she cannot fully conceal the anxiety boiling just beneath her surface. Kody pushes his food around his plate, lost in thought, the enormity of his responsibilities pressing heavily upon him. The conversation is tentative, careful, each word measured. Robyn finally breaks the silence, her voice soft yet sure. "We've been through a lot today. I hope we can start moving forward, really listening to each other." Janelle nods slightly, adding, "It's going to take time, but maybe this is a turning point." Meri doesn't say anything. Her gaze is far away, but her presence represents cautious optimism. Christine finally speaks, her voice calm but vulnerable. "We can't change the past, but we can choose how we handle the future." A reflective moment occurs before the screen fades to black. Kody looks at his family, the wives together, yet each emotionally detached in their own way. He realizes the path ahead will be paved with truth, patience, and a willingness to face some painful truths of their collective past. Robyn, Janelle, Meri, and Christine each carry their own loads, their own reflections, but there is an undercurrent of hope, fragile and flickering, that even in chaos, family bonds can survive.